The broadcast began without warning, seizing every human screen as though the Empire had reached through the stars to grip humanity by the throat. A dim chamber flickered into view, revealing Commander Elias Ward suspended by crackling restraints that pulsed like living chains. His uniform was torn, his skin bruised, yet his eyes, bloodshot and determined, held a steady, unbroken glare. Elias had always been defined by quiet resolve, the kind that made people trust him even when circumstances were bleak, and seeing that resolve tested so brutally sent a shiver through every viewer who knew his reputation. An enormous figure stepped into the frame, its armored silhouette unmistakable. The Imperial Warden moved with unnerving deliberation, each footfall echoing as though the chamber itself feared him. His voice, distorted by mechanical modulation, seeped into the minds of listeners. "This human defied the Empire," he announced. "Observe the cost of such arrogance." He didn't need to justify his cruelty. Displaying dominance was justification enough for an empire built on intimidation. Elias lifted his head despite the strain tugging at every wounded muscle. His breathing faltered, yet he refused to let pain shape his expression. He had been captured during a reconnaissance mission, buying time for his squad to escape, and he carried that sacrifice the way he carried every responsibility, without complaint. Now, bound before billions, he stood as an unintentional symbol of everything the Empire hoped to crush. General Mara Kincaid watched from the Earth Defense War Chamber, her posture rigid, her hands clenching the console as though the pressure alone could keep her fury contained. She had trusted Elias for years, valuing his discipline and the compassion he reserved for those under his command. He was a rare kind of officer who inspired loyalty not through authority, but through integrity. Seeing him displayed like a trophy felt like an insult carved directly into her bones. The room around her buzzed with horrified whispers, yet she kept her focus locked on the image, reading every subtle detail in his battered face. The warden raised a plasma staff shimmering with volatile energy. Elias tensed but made no plea, no protest. The strike landed with explosive brightness, ripping a hoarse cry from him. It was a kind of sound that wounded listeners more deeply than any weapon could. But even as the pain surged, Elias forced out a ragged whisper. "Humanity does not break." The words were frail, barely formed, yet they traveled like a spark leaping across a powder trail. Anyone listening felt a surge of something ancient, defiance, pride, unity. Mara's expression hardened. She saw beyond the agony coating his voice, recognizing the deliberate intent behind his words. Elias wasn't simply surviving. He was communicating. He wanted humanity to understand that endurance was its greatest strength. Every moment he remained unbroken served as a challenge to the Empire's arrogance. The warden struck again, slower this time, dragging out the suffering with calculated cruelty. Elias gritted his teeth, sweat and blood trickling down his face, but his gaze stayed forward, refusing to allow the warden the satisfaction of complete collapse. His refusal to break revealed more about him than years of service records ever could. He had always shouldered unbearable burdens, always stepped forward when others faltered. Now, he was embodying the very spirit he had spent his life defending. Inside the war chamber, the officers shifted uneasily, anger rising like heat in a sealed room. Several turned to Mara for orders, but she raised her hand for silence. Her voice, barely above a whisper, still commanded absolute attention. "Watch him," she said. "He's telling us what must be done." She could already sense the path forming before them. The Empire believed fear would silence humanity, but the suffering of one man was forging something far more dangerous than submission. The warden seized Elias's chin, forcing his face directly toward the camera. "One human falls," he declared, "and the Empire rises." His grip tightened, drawing another shudder of pain from Elias. Then, with final, theatrical disdain, he released him. The broadcast cut abruptly, leaving screens filled only with darkness and the distorted reflections of those who had witnessed the torment. For several heartbeats, humanity remained frozen in silence. The moment felt heavy, as though the entire species inhaled the same trembling breath. Then Mara straightened, her voice steady with purpose. "Prepare the council," she commanded. "We move immediately." Her officers reacted instantly, galvanized by the clarity in her tone. She remained still a moment longer, staring at the blank screen where Elias had stood unbroken. His endurance had become a message carved into her resolve. The Empire intended to extinguish human hope by humiliating a single man. Instead, it had ignited a storm. This would not be the end of Elias's story. It would be the beginning of humanity's answer, an answer the Empire would not be prepared to face. The dawn after broadcast felt unnervingly muted, as though sunlight itself hesitated to touch a world still reeling from what it had witnessed. General Mara Kincaid stood in the vast Earth Defense War Chamber, a circular command center humming with tension. Every officer present carried the same haunted expression, a reflection of Elias Ward's suffering etched into their minds. Mara's gaze remained fixed on the darkened screen that had shown the broadcast only hours earlier. She kept replaying his expression, not the pain, but the unwavering defiance buried beneath it. That resolve was more powerful than any imperial threat. She straightened as Admiral Torres approached, his uniform crisp, but his posture weighted with urgency. "General," he said quietly, "the council is assembled. They're waiting for your directive." Torres had always been analytical, preferring strategy over sentiment, but today there was an emotional gravity in his eyes. He had served with Elias during 3 major campaigns and respected him deeply. The thought of Elias suffering somewhere beyond reach ignited a rare fury beneath Torres's controlled demeanor. Mara inhaled slowly, storing her anger in a place she could access without letting it consume her. "We proceed," she replied. "Humanity cannot stand idle." Her voice held no hesitation. She turned toward the center of the chamber, where the star map flickered to life with a single red beacon pulsing ominously. Carthus 9, the Empire's most fortified world. A fortress draped in legend and dread. A murmur rippled across the room as the officers absorbed the location. One of the newer commanders, Lieutenant Aaron Hale, stepped forward. "General, no ship has ever breached Carthus IX's defenses. It's practically a citadel orbiting a citadel." His caution wasn't cowardice. It was honesty. Hale had earned his position through disciplined logic, and though young, he understood the gravity of reckless decisions. Mara met his gaze. "We aren't attacking their stronghold to make history. We're going because Elias is alive." She paused, allowing the weight of her next words to settle over the room. "And because the Empire made this personal." The officers exchanged glances, many visibly steeling themselves. They all knew Elias. Some had served under him. Some had trained beside him, and all respected the unwavering loyalty he embodied. His capture was more than a tactical disadvantage. It was an insult aimed at humanity's collective spirit. Torres stepped closer to the holographic map. "Intel indicates he's being held in the central ward of the planetary stronghold. Heavy shielding, limited access routes, and we expect the Empire to reinforce it now that they know we're mobilizing." His tone suggested that even speaking the logistics felt like swallowing broken glass. Mara studied the rotating model of the fortress world. "We'll need a fleet large enough to overwhelm their perimeter," she said. "Every colony with hyperspace capability must contribute." She lifted her chin with renewed determination. "We launch within 18 hours. The declaration sent officers scrambling into motion. Orders were transmitted to lunar bases, orbital platforms, distant colonies, even civilian mining fleets capable of retrofitting into combat support. Every corner of human space responded with startling speed, as though Elias's cry of defiance had rewired their instincts overnight. While the chamber surged with activity, Mara lingered by the star map. Hale approached cautiously. "General," he began, "if we're going to commit this many resources, the people deserve to know why." "They already do," Mara replied. "They saw him endure. That broadcast wasn't just a threat, it was a revelation." She traced her fingers along the glowing outline of Carthus 9. "The Empire thinks fear is a weapon. Elias showed them it isn't." Hale nodded, absorbing the lesson not in words but in conviction. He admired Mara for her clarity. She had a way of transforming fear into action without obscuring the risks. It made him understand why she and Elias had been such an effective pair. She wielded strategy with precision while he carried morale like a torch. Hours later, Updated intelligence reports streamed into the war chamber. The Empire was mobilizing additional fleets, anticipating humanity's retaliation. Mara examined the data, her expression unreadable. Her mind moved through possibilities, contingencies, sacrifices. War was never clean. Every decision carved scars, and today's decisions would carve deep ones. Torres returned with an update. Colonies are responding faster than expected. Ships are already en route. The fleet will reach full strength on schedule. His voice carried a hint of pride. Humanity, when pushed, didn't falter. It united. Mara felt the same pride, but beneath it pulsed something heavier. Grief sharpened into purpose. She dismissed the officers to continue preparations and stepped away to a quieter corner. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember Elias not as a prisoner hanging in a dim chamber, but as a man who once reassured frightened recruits during a disastrous training exercise. She remembered the warmth in his voice, the certainty in his instructions, the ability he had to make others feel capable even in their own doubt. "Hold on," she murmured under her breath. "We're coming." By the time the 18 hours dwindled toward zero, humanity's fleet assembled in orbit, hundreds of ships forming a glittering barrier around Earth. Mara stood at the command deck, overlooking the massive armada. The sight stirred something fierce and unstoppable within her. This was no longer a rescue operation. It was a declaration, a response to an empire that believed one broken man could break an entire species. Mara turned toward Torres. "Prepare the hyperspace jump," she said. "We bring him home." The vast expanse of hyperspace shimmered around the fleet, like a storm of fractured stars, casting shifting light across every console of the command bridge. General Mara Kincaid stood unmoving, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the swirling currents outside the viewport. Each flicker of blue-white light reminded her of the seconds slipping away. Seconds Elias Ward continued to endure whatever horrors the Empire had devised. She felt an ache in her chest, not of fear but of urgency, the kind that threatened to unravel even the most disciplined commander if left uncontained. Admiral Torres approached, his boots striking the metallic floor with deliberate steadiness. "Scouting vessels report increased activity around Carthus 9, he said. "The Empire is repositioning their outer defenses. They're preparing for a siege." There was no surprise in his tone, only a steely acceptance. The Empire would never respond with restraint. Mara turned to face him. "Good," she replied. "Let them fortify every inch of their skies. It won't matter." Her voice wasn't arrogant. It was resolute. She knew the cost of war intimately, had buried mentors and comrades across half a dozen star systems. But she also knew what humanity was capable of when cornered. The Empire had mistaken a united species for a fragile one. Lieutenant Aaron Hale stood near the tactical screens, analyzing the patterns of Imperial ship deployment. His brows were furrowed in concentration, his fingertips gliding over holographic displays as he magnified enemy formations. He was young, but he carried a precision that made him invaluable. "General," he called out, "I'm detecting structural fluctuations in the planetary shield. Not large, but rhythmic. It might be tied to energy cycling." He hesitated before adding, "If we time our assault during one of the dips, we may weaken their defensive grid faster." Torres leaned closer, studying the pattern. "It's risky. The margin is almost non-existent, which means it's exactly the kind of opening we need," Mara answered. She stepped beside Hale, her eyes tracing the waves of data. "Good work, Lieutenant. Prepare the fleet to adjust formation upon arrival." A spark of pride lit Hale's face, but he quickly masked it with disciplined focus. Recognition from Mara Kincaid was not given lightly, and he felt a renewed determination to prove he deserved it. As they moved deeper into hyperspace, a sudden tremor rippled through the deck. Mara's hand shot out instinctively to steady herself, and Torres snapped toward the sensor officer. "Report." "Gravitic disruption ahead," the officer replied. "Not natural. It's a blockade field." Mara exhaled sharply. Of course they would deploy one this far out. The Empire rarely underestimated its enemies twice. Blocking hyperspace meant forcing the fleet into real space prematurely, where ambush tactics could devastate unprepared vessels. "Emergency disengage in 30 seconds, Torres ordered. Mara stepped forward, bracing as the ship shuddered again. "All hands, prepare for abrupt re-entry," she commanded. Her voice carried across every vessel through the fleet-wide channel, calm enough to anchor even those who had never encountered an Imperial blockade before. Hyperspace fractured around them, collapsing into a storm of ruptured light until, with a burst of violent clarity, the fleet surged into real space. Before them stretched an array of Imperial warships, sleek, angular vessels bristling with weapons. They formed a wall between humanity's armada and the path to Karthus 9. For a heartbeat, the bridge was silent. Then Mara lifted her chin. "They think this will slow us down." She raised her hand toward Torres. "Initiate full engagement." The battle ignited instantly. Human ships surged forward, unleashing coordinated volleys as Imperial cruisers countered with disciplined precision. The void between the fleets erupted into streaks of plasma and bursts of burning metal. Hale's fingers danced across the tactical interface, relaying maneuvers with a clarity that surprised even himself. "Left flank holding," he reported, "but the right side. Redirect auxiliary carriers to reinforce," Mara said. "Keep the formation tight. No fractures." Torres watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. This is only their first line of defense. They're buying time for reinforcements. "They won't buy enough," Mara replied. Her voice trembled with controlled fire. She could not afford hesitation, not when Elias' survival hinged on every decision she made. As the fight raged on, the flagship shook under the force of a glancing hit. Sparks showered from a damaged console, and the lights flickered. Mara steadied herself against a support beam, unwilling to give even the appearance of faltering. "Status. We're still operational," Torres said. "Hull integrity holding." Through the viewport, streaks of Imperial wreckage drifted past, silent reminders of the price of defiance. Yet even as the enemy line began to fracture, Mara felt no triumph. Every destroyed ship, every explosion, was another clock tick, another moment Elias remained alone in pain. Finally, Hale's voice broke through the chaos. "General, the blockade is collapsing." Mara's heartbeat quickened. She stepped to the front of the bridge, eyes blazing with renewed purpose. "Signal the fleet. Push through the gap. Karthus 9 is ahead." As the human armada surged forward toward the distant, darkened world, Mara felt the gravity of what awaited them. The next battle would not be fought in open space. It would be fought in the Empire's fortress itself. And for Elias, they would tear down every wall. The stars ahead dimmed into the shadow of Karthus 9, and Mara whispered, "Hold on. We're almost there." The drop pod slammed into Karthus IX's surface like falling meteors, sending shockwaves of dust and debris cascading across the barren landscape. Mara Kincaid's boots hit the scorched ground, her pulse steady despite the roar of explosions echoing from the Imperial stronghold ahead. Around her, soldiers spilled from the pods, armored and armed, their faces set with grim determination. Every one of them carried the weight of humanity's hope, their loyalty forged in the image of Elias Ward's defiance. "Formation Delta," Mara barked, moving forward with fluid precision. "Advance on the northern sector. Suppress enemy positions." Her voice cut through the chaos, firm and unwavering. The squad responded instantly, moving like a living wave toward the fortress. Smoke and fire streaked the sky as Imperial turrets opened fire, the searing plasma cutting through the air with lethal intent. Mara ducked instinctively behind a crumbled wall, returning fire with calculated bursts, each shot deliberate, each movement measured. Ahead, the central tower loomed like a dark monolith, its spires piercing the sky, energy shields flickering in iridescent patterns. Mara's eyes locked onto it. Elias was inside, perhaps barely conscious, his survival tethered to their success. Her heart clenched at the thought, but she refused to let it slow her steps. He had never faltered when others depended on him, and she would not falter now. Suddenly, a towering figure emerged from the shadow of a tower. The warden, its 4 armored limbs moved with unnerving fluidity, each step cracking the ground beneath it. The visor glinted in the red light of burning turrets, and the plasma staff it wielded hummed with deadly energy. "Humanity cannot endure," it growled, voice resonating like a metallic gale. "You come to die with your soldier." Mara's jaw tightened. "We're not here to die," she said, her tone icy and precise. "We're here to end this." The soldiers around her tightened their grip on weapons, forming a protective line. She understood immediately that this confrontation was both physical and symbolic, the Empire's cruelty embodied in one being. Her hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from the accumulated fury of months of anticipation, strategy, and the memory of Elias's suffering. The warden lunged, the staff swinging in a deadly arc. Mara rolled, narrowly avoiding the crackling energy, and fired 2 rapid bursts from her pulse rifle. Sparks erupted where the plasma struck the warden's armor, but it barely slowed. It was fast, relentless, terrifying. Mara realized that brute force alone would not win this fight. She had to combine precision, timing, and strategy, the very things she and Elias had always relied upon together. A soldier to her left fell, the blast throwing him across scorched rubble. Mara's stomach clenched, but she forced herself to focus. Every movement now had to protect her team and keep the path to the tower open. She darted toward a supply crate, grabbing a compact grenade launcher. The warden advanced, staff swinging, crushing debris with every step. Mara aimed carefully, releasing a burst of explosive energy that staggered the creature backward. Dust filled the air, masking her next move. She bolted forward, weaving through enemy fire, each step calculated yet instinctive. Finally, she reached the tower's inner doors, smashing them open and throwing a small charge to seal the warden's immediate pursuit. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred with smoke and adrenaline, but she did not stop. Inside, energy restraints glowed with sickly hum, and at their center slumped Elias Ward, battered, bruised, barely conscious. The sight pulled at Mara's chest, and she rushed to him, ignoring sparks and falling debris. "Elias," she said, kneeling beside him. Her voice trembled slightly despite the armor shielding her. "We're here. You're coming home." She worked quickly, deactivating the energy cuffs with steady hands, each spark illuminating the deep lines of pain etched into his face. He coughed, lifting his head weakly. "Knew you'd come," he rasped, a faint, ironic smile breaking through his exhaustion. Mara gritted her teeth, lifting him carefully onto her shoulders. "We're not leaving anyone behind," she muttered, more to herself than him. Around them, the floor trembled as the warden regained balance, roaring with renewed fury. Mara adjusted her hold on Elias, pulling a compact plasma blade from her belt. The warden charged again, but a sudden barrage of explosives planted by their team forced it back, creating a temporary corridor to the extraction point. The transport pods awaited outside, descending through flames and smoke, engines howling as if echoing humanity's defiance. Mara ran toward them, each step a testament to endurance and determination. Enemy soldiers surged to intercept, but her strike team held the line, buying precious seconds. Elias's weight was a reminder of the stakes. Their mission was personal, visceral, and immediate. As they reached the pods, Mara slammed the activation panel. The engines roared to life, lifting them into the sky as Cardus 9 stretched beneath them, burning, defeated, and fractured. Elias's breathing steadied slightly, his eyes reflecting relief and lingering pain. "You saved me," he whispered, voice raw. Mara shook her head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "No," she said, voice steady. "You reminded the galaxy what it means to fight, to endure, to rise. Humanity saves itself because of people like you." The transport slipped into hyperspace, leaving Cardus 9 behind, a smoldering symbol of the Empire's arrogance. The fleet followed, carrying survivors' victories and a renewed sense of purpose. They had not only rescued Elias Ward, they had ignited hope, unity, and the enduring message that humanity does not break.